Asterisk asterisk. What happened when my father-in-law asked me to check on my mother-in-law? It started on a sunny afternoon, the kind of day when the air feels light and the world seems full of possibilities. My name is Jake, and I've been married to Emily for 3 years. We met in college, fell in love quickly, and now we have a beautiful little girl, Lily. Life was good, though not without its challenges. One day, my father-in-law, Robert, asked me for a favor. He and my mother-in-law, Laura, had been having some problems. Robert, a business executive, traveled often, and Laura had been feeling lonely. He was worried about her, and as a good son-in-law, I wanted to help. "Jake, can you check on Laura? She's been a bit down lately," Robert asked during a family barbecue. I nodded, not thinking much of it. Laura was always kind to me, treating me like her own son. The next day, I called Laura and arranged to visit her. I arrived at their large, elegant house in the suburbs. The house was quiet, almost too quiet. Laura greeted me at the door, her smile warm, but her eyes a bit sad. "Thank you for coming, Jake," she said, hugging me lightly. She was wearing a simple dress that hugged her figure in a way I couldn't help but notice. Laura was beautiful, with dark hair and striking blue eyes that had seen a lot of life. We sat in the living room, talking about everything and nothing. Laura made tea, and we chatted about Lily, work, and life in general. As the afternoon went on, I started to notice the little things, the way Laura laughed, the softness of her voice, the way her eyes sparkled when she talked about her garden. There was something about her that drew me in, a warmth and kindness that made me feel comfortable and at ease. I realized how lonely she must be with Robert away so often. I felt a strange connection with her, something more than just familial affection. As I was leaving, Laura touched my arm gently. "Jake, would you like to see my collection? It's something I don't show many people, but I feel like you'd appreciate it." I was curious and agreed. Laura led me to a room at the back of the house. Inside, I was surprised to see a collection of beautiful, intricate art pieces, paintings, sculptures, and artifacts from around the world. "This is amazing, Laura. How did you get all these?" I asked, genuinely impressed. "Robert and I collected them over the years. Each piece has a story, a memory attached to it," she said, her voice soft and nostalgic. She looked at me, her eyes locking with mine. "It's nice to share this with someone who appreciates it." There was a moment of silence, charged with unspoken words and emotions. I felt a strange pull towards her, something I couldn't explain. I quickly thanked her and left, my mind racing with thoughts I didn't want to acknowledge. Driving home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. Laura had always been just my mother-in-law, but now there was a new layer to our relationship, something deeper and more complex. I tried to push the thoughts away, focusing on Emily and Lily. But over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about Laura. Her smile, her touch, the way she looked at me, it was all burned into my mind. I found myself making excuses to visit her, helping with little things around the house, just to be near her. Emily didn't suspect anything. She was busy with work and Lily, and she trusted me completely. I felt guilty, but I couldn't help myself. There was a magnetic pull towards Laura that I couldn't resist. One afternoon, I found myself at Laura's house again. She welcomed me with a smile, and we spent the afternoon talking and laughing. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the room, Laura looked at me with an intensity that took my breath away. "Jake, there's something I need to tell you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I've been feeling very lonely, and you've been a wonderful friend, but there's something more. I feel something more for you." I was stunned, my heart pounding in my chest. I felt the same way, but hearing her say it made it real. I didn't know what to say, so I just looked at her, my mind racing. Laura took a step closer, her eyes searching mine. "Do you feel the same way?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. I nodded, unable to speak. The air between us was thick with tension and desire. Laura reached out and took my hand, her touch sending a jolt of electricity through me. We stood there, looking at each other, knowing that this moment was a turning point. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't deny my feelings. I was falling for Laura, my mother-in-law, and there was no turning back. Laura's confession hung in the air between us, a fragile thread that bound us together. Her hand in mine felt warm, comforting, yet it set my pulse racing. I swallowed hard, trying to find the words, but nothing seemed adequate to express the turmoil inside me. "Laura, I don't know what to say," I finally managed, my voice hoarse with emotion. "This feels so wrong, but at the same time, I can't stop thinking about you." She stepped closer, her eyes soft and understanding. I know, Jake. Believe me, I've been struggling with this too, but the more I try to ignore it, the stronger it gets. Her fingers tightened around mine, a silent plea for understanding. We stood there, caught in the web of our own making, until the tension became unbearable. I couldn't resist any longer. I reached out, cupping her face in my hands, and kissed her. It was a hesitant kiss at first, testing the waters, but then it deepened, fueled by the weeks of suppressed desire. Her lips were soft and tasted faintly of the tea we had shared. She responded with equal fervor, her arms wrapping around my neck, pulling me closer. The world outside ceased to exist. There was only Laura and me, and the intoxicating rush of our connection. We broke apart, breathless and wide-eyed, the enormity of what we had done sinking in. We can't do this, I said, though my body ached to pull her back into my arms. Emily, Robert, it would destroy them. Laura's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. You're right, but I can't deny what I feel, Jake. I haven't felt this alive in years. She took a step back, wiping her eyes. Maybe we need to figure this out. We need to be careful. I nodded, knowing that careful was an understatement. We were playing with fire, and the consequences could be devastating. Yet a part of me was willing to take the risk. Let's take things slow, I suggested. We need to think this through, not act on impulse. Laura agreed, and we spent the next few days trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy. But the air between us crackled with unspoken words and stolen glances. Every time I visited, I found it harder to leave, and every touch, every smile, only intensified my longing for her. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the garden, Laura invited me to stay for dinner. Emily was out of town for a work trip, and Lily was with my parents, so I accepted, eager for any excuse to be near her. We cooked together, a simple meal of pasta and salad, but it felt like the most intimate experience. Our hands brushed as we chopped vegetables, and we laughed over shared memories, the easy camaraderie between us growing stronger. When we finally sat down to eat, the atmosphere was warm and relaxed, a stark contrast to the tension that had been building. Jake, I've been thinking a lot about us, Laura said softly, breaking the comfortable silence. I know this is complicated, but I can't imagine not having you in my life. I reached across the table, taking her hand in mine. I feel the same way, Laura, but we need to be smart about this. We can't let our feelings hurt the people we care about. She nodded, her eyes reflecting the same resolve I felt. We will be careful, but promise me one thing, Jake. Promise me that we'll be honest with each other, no matter what happens. I promise, I said, my voice firm. We'll figure this out together. After dinner, we moved to the living room, sitting close on the couch, our conversation flowing easily. The night grew late, and the room grew dim, lit only by the soft glow of the lamp. The intimacy of the moment was undeniable, and as we sat there, side by side, the pull between us became too strong to ignore. Laura looked at me, her eyes dark with longing. Stay tonight, Jake, please. I hesitated, knowing that crossing this line would change everything. But the need to be with her, to hold her, was overpowering. I nodded, unable to trust my voice, and she led me upstairs to her bedroom. The room was dimly lit, the moon casting a silver glow through the window. Laura turned to me, her expression vulnerable yet determined. Jake, are you sure about this? I stepped closer, cupping her face in my hands. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. With that, I kissed her deeply, pouring all my pent-up desire and emotion into that kiss. Our clothes fell away, discarded in the heat of the moment. The feel of her skin against mine was electrifying, every touch sending shivers down my spine. We moved together in perfect harmony, our bodies finding a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. In the quiet of the night, surrounded by the warmth of her embrace, I felt a profound connection that went beyond physical desire. It was a meeting of souls, an understanding that transcended the boundaries of our complicated situation. As we lay there, tangled in each other's arms, I knew that this was only the beginning. The road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but I was ready to face them as long as Laura was by my side. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotion and secrecy. Laura and I navigated our stolen moments with a careful, almost desperate precision. We became experts in clandestine glances and whispered conversations. Each encounter was electric, filled with a sense of urgency and passion that I had never known before. Every visit to her house felt like a step into another world, one where time stood still and nothing mattered except the two of us. We developed a routine of sorts. I would help her with chores around the house, simple things like fixing a leaky faucet or tending to her garden. These tasks provided the perfect cover for our stolen moments together. One afternoon, as I was fixing a shelf in the living room, Laura came up behind me, her presence sending a shiver down my spine. "Need any help?" she asked, her voice low and teasing. I turned to face her, my breath catching at the sight of her. She was wearing a sundress, the fabric clinging to her curves in a way that made my heart race. "I think I've got it," I said, my voice thick with desire. Laura stepped closer, her hand brushing against mine. "I can't stop thinking about you, Jake," she whispered, her eyes locking with mine. "Every moment we're apart feels like an eternity." I set the tool down, unable to resist her any longer. "I feel the same way, Laura. Every minute I'm not with you, I'm counting down the seconds until I can be." Our lips met in a fierce kiss, all the pent-up longing and frustration pouring out. We moved to the couch, our hands exploring each other with a hunger that seemed insatiable. It wasn't just physical, it was an emotional release, a reaffirmation of the bond we shared. Afterward, we lay tangled together, our breathing slowly returning to normal. Laura rested her head on my chest, her fingers tracing lazy patterns on my skin. "What are we going to do, Jake?" she asked softly. "We can't keep living like this, always hiding, always afraid." I sighed, knowing she was right. The weight of our situation was beginning to take its toll. "I don't know, Laura, but I can't lose you. We'll find a way to make this work." As the days turned into weeks, we became bolder, more confident in our deception. We found new places to meet, places where we could be alone without fear of being discovered. Our favorite spot was a small cabin in the woods, a place Robert had bought years ago but rarely used. It became our sanctuary, a place where we could be ourselves without the weight of our secret hanging over us. One weekend, we decided to spend the whole day at the cabin. We arrived early in the morning, the sunlight filtering through the trees, casting a dappled glow over everything. Inside, the cabin was cozy and inviting, a perfect escape from the world. We spent the morning exploring the woods, walking hand in hand, talking about everything and nothing. It was easy to forget the complications of our situation when we were together. In those moments, it felt like we were the only two people in the world. Back at the cabin, we made lunch together, the simple act of cooking side by side filling me with a sense of contentment I had never known. As we sat down to eat, Laura reached across the table, taking my hand in hers. "Jake, I've been thinking a lot about our future," she said, her eyes searching mine. I squeezed her hand, my heart swelling with emotion. "Me too, Laura. I want a future with you, but I don't know how we can make it work without hurting Emily and Robert." She nodded, a sadness in her eyes. "I know, but we can't keep living like this. We need to find a way to be together openly and honestly." The conversation weighed heavily on me as the day wore on. We made love that afternoon, a slow, tender exploration that left us both breathless. It was more than just physical. It was a reaffirmation of our commitment to each other, a promise that we would find a way to make this work. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the cabin, we lay together, wrapped in each other's arms. "I love you, Jake," Laura whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "I can't imagine my life without you." I held her close, my heart aching with love and fear. "I love you too, Laura. We'll find a way, I promise." But as much as I wanted to believe my own words, the reality of our situation loomed large. The fear of discovery, the guilt of betraying Emily and Robert, it all threatened to tear us apart. Yet, in that moment, lying in Laura's arms, I knew that whatever the future held, we would face it together. The secret we shared became both a source of immense joy and unbearable tension. Every encounter with Laura felt like walking a tightrope, thrilling, yet precarious. Our stolen moments were filled with passion, but the constant fear of being discovered gnawed at us. We knew we couldn't continue living in the shadows forever. One evening, Emily mentioned that Robert was planning a surprise weekend getaway for their anniversary. As she talked about the trip, a pang of guilt stabbed at my heart. I'd become so entangled with Laura that it was hard to separate my feelings of love from the shame of betrayal. With Emily and Robert away for the weekend, Laura and I decided to spend time at the cabin, our sanctuary from the world. We arrived early Saturday morning, the air crisp and filled with the scent of pine. The cabin was a haven, a place where we could let our guard down and be ourselves. We spent the day hiking through the woods, enjoying the simple pleasure of each other's company. The tension of our secret life melted away, replaced by the serenity of the forest and the warmth of our love. As we returned to the cabin, the sun was setting, casting a golden glow over everything. Inside, we built a fire and settled in front of it, the crackling flames providing a comforting backdrop. Laura leaned against me, her head resting on my shoulder. "Jake, I wish we could stay like this forever," she murmured. I kissed the top of her head, holding her close. "Me too, Laura, but we need to figure out a way to be together without hurting the people we love." She sighed, her breath warm against my neck. "I know. I've been thinking about it a lot. Maybe we need to come clean, tell Emily and Robert the truth. It's risky, but living like this is tearing us apart." The thought of revealing our affair terrified me. The potential fallout was immense, but Laura was right. We couldn't keep hiding forever. "You're right," I said finally. "We need to be honest, but we have to be careful, plan it out. We can't just drop a bombshell like this without thinking it through." Laura nodded, her eyes reflecting the same determination I felt. "We'll do it together, Jake. No matter what happens, we'll face it together." That night, we made love with a tenderness that spoke of our deep connection and shared resolve. It was a slow, intimate dance, each touch a silent promise of our commitment to each other. In the quiet aftermath, as we lay tangled in each other's arms, I felt a sense of peace. For the first time, it seemed like we had a plan, a way forward. The next day, we returned home, the reality of our situation settling over us like a heavy fog. Emily was cheerful, excited about the upcoming trip, and I couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt every time she smiled at me. The weight of our secret pressed down harder than ever. That evening, as we prepared for bed, Emily turned to me, her eyes bright with anticipation. "Jake, I've been thinking about our future. Maybe it's time we start planning for another baby. Lily would love a sibling, and I think we're ready." Her words hit me like a sledgehammer. The future she envisioned was one where our family grew, where our bond strengthened. And here I was, planning to tear that apart with my betrayal. "Emily, that's something we need to talk about," I stammered, my mind racing. She looked at me, her expression shifting from excitement to concern. "Is something wrong, Jake? You've been acting strange lately." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "Emily, there's something I need to tell you. It's complicated and I don't know where to start." Her eyes widened, fear creeping into her gaze. "What is it, Jake? You're scaring me." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a message. I glanced at it, my heart sinking when I saw it was from Laura. She needed to talk, urgently. I turned back to Emily, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. "I need to step outside for a moment. We'll talk when I get back." Emily nodded, her worry evident. I stepped out onto the porch, my hands shaking as I dialed Laura's number. She answered on the first ring, her voice trembling. "Jake, we have a problem. Robert found out. He saw the messages." My blood ran cold. "What? How?" "He went through my phone. He knows everything, Jake. He's furious and he's on his way to confront you." Panic surged through me. "Laura, we need to stay calm. I'll handle this. Just stay where you are." I hung up, my mind racing. The careful balance we had maintained was crumbling, and everything was about to come crashing down. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation. There was no turning back now. The truth was out, and we would have to face the consequences of our actions. As I stood there, waiting for the inevitable confrontation, a storm of emotions raged within me. Fear, guilt, and a desperate hope that somehow we could find a way through this. The calm before the storm was brief, and as Robert's car pulled into the driveway, I knew our lives were about to change forever. The tension in the air was palpable as Robert's car pulled up to the house. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing the gravity of the situation. I watched him step out of the car, his face set in a grim expression that left no doubt about his anger. Emily had come out to the porch, her worry deepening as she saw Robert's demeanor. "Jake, what's going on?" Emily's voice trembled, her eyes darting between me and her father. "Emily, go inside," Robert said sharply, his eyes never leaving mine. "This is between Jake and me." Emily looked at me, her confusion and fear mirrored in my own eyes. I nodded slightly, hoping to reassure her even as my stomach churned with dread. She hesitated, then reluctantly went back inside, leaving Robert and me alone on the porch. Robert took a step closer, his fists clenched at his sides. "I trusted you, Jake. I welcomed you into my family, and this is how you repay me. His voice was low, dangerous. "Robert, I started, but he cut me off. Save it. I saw the messages. I know everything. How long has this been going on?" His eyes blazed with anger and hurt. I swallowed hard, struggling to find my voice. "A few months," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. He shook his head, disbelief and betrayal etched on his face. "How could you? Laura, my wife, your mother-in-law? How could you do this to Emily?" "I'm sorry, Robert. I never meant for this to happen. It just did." The words sounded hollow, even to my own ears. I knew they were inadequate, that nothing could excuse what I had done. "Sorry?" He laughed bitterly. "Sorry doesn't even begin to cover it, Jake. You've destroyed my family. Do you have any idea what this will do to Emily?" The weight of his words crashed down on me. Emily, my sweet, loving wife who had trusted me completely. I felt a wave of shame and regret wash over me. "I never wanted to hurt her," I said, my voice breaking. "I love her, Robert. But I also love Laura." Robert's face twisted in anger. "Love? You call this love? This is betrayal, plain and simple. You made your choice, Jake, and now you have to live with the consequences." He took a deep breath, visibly trying to control his temper. "You need to leave. Pack your things and go. You're not welcome here anymore, and you will never see Emily or Lily again." The finality of his words hit me like a punch to the gut. "Robert, please, let me talk to Emily. Let me explain." "No." His voice was firm, unyielding. "You've done enough damage. I will not let you hurt her any more than you already have." I felt a deep, wrenching pain in my chest, the realization of what I had lost sinking in. My family, my home, my life with Emily and Lily, all of it was slipping through my fingers. But I knew Robert was right. I had made my choices, and now I had to face the consequences. I walked back into the house, my legs feeling like lead. Emily was waiting in the living room, her face pale and anxious. "What's happening, Jake? Why is Dad so angry?" I took a deep breath, knowing that this moment would change everything. "Emily, there's something I need to tell you, something that will hurt you, and for that I'm so sorry." She looked at me, her eyes wide with fear. "What is it, Jake?" I struggled to find the words, my throat tight with emotion. "I've been having an affair with your mother." The silence that followed was deafening. Emily's face went from confusion to shock to devastation in a matter of seconds. No, that can't be true," she whispered, shaking her head as if trying to wake from a nightmare. "I'm so sorry, Emily. I never meant for this to happen. It just did." The words felt useless, a flimsy shield against the hurricane of her pain. She stared at me, tears streaming down her face. "How could you, Jake? How could you do this to us, to Lily?" The sight of her tears broke me. "I don't know. I got caught up in something I couldn't control, but I love you, Emily. I always have." "Love?" She laughed bitterly, echoing Robert's words. "You call this love? You destroyed everything we had, everything we built together." "I know," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "and I will regret it for the rest of my life." She looked away, unable to bear the sight of me. "Leave, Jake. Just go. I can't look at you right now." I nodded, feeling a crushing sense of defeat. I went upstairs, packing a bag with the essentials. The house that had been my home now felt like a stranger's place, filled with memories that were tainted by my betrayal. As I walked out the door, I took one last look at Emily, hoping against hope that there might still be a chance for redemption. But her eyes were filled with hurt and anger, a wall that I knew I could never breach. I left the house, my heart heavy with sorrow. Robert was waiting outside, his expression hard. "You did the right thing leaving. Don't ever come back, Jake." I nodded, unable to speak. I got into my car and drove away, the weight of my actions pressing down on me. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with the pain of what I had lost. But I knew one thing for sure. I had to find a way to make things right, to atone for the mistakes I had made. As I drove away from the life I had known, I felt a deep, aching void inside me. I had lost everything, my wife, my daughter, my home. And the woman I loved was now out of reach, our future together uncertain and fraught with challenges. But in that moment of despair, I made a vow to myself. I would find a way to rebuild, to make amends for the pain I had caused. It would be a long, difficult journey, but I was determined to find a path to redemption, no matter how hard it might be. The weeks that followed my departure were the hardest of my life. I found myself in a small, sparsely furnished apartment, the silence pressing in on me like a physical weight. Each day was a struggle to get out of bed, to face the reality of what I had done and what I had lost. Emily and Lily were gone, and the home we had built together was now a distant memory. I spent my days working, throwing myself into my job as a way to escape the torment of my thoughts. The evenings were the worst, filled with endless hours of reflection and regret. I tried reaching out to Emily several times, but she didn't respond. I couldn't blame her. The pain I had caused was too great to be easily forgiven. One night, as I sat alone in my apartment, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Laura. My heart leapt and sank simultaneously as I opened it. "Jake, I hope you're doing okay. Robert and I have been having a lot of difficult conversations. He's devastated, as you can imagine. But I need to see you. We need to talk about what happens next. Can you meet me at the cabin tomorrow?" I stared at the message for a long time, my mind racing. Seeing Laura again filled me with a mix of longing and dread. But I knew we needed to face this, to figure out where we stood and what our future, if any, might look like. The next day I drove to the cabin. The familiar surroundings brought a wave of nostalgia and sadness. This place had been our refuge, a haven where we could be ourselves without fear. Now, it felt like a ghost of what it once was. Laura was already there when I arrived, standing on the porch, her arms wrapped around herself as if for protection. She looked up as I approached, her eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and determination. "Jake," she said softly, her voice tinged with emotion. "Laura," I replied, my heart aching at the sight of her. We went inside and sat down, the silence between us heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Laura broke the silence. "Robert and I have decided to separate," she said, her voice steady but filled with pain. "There's too much hurt, too much betrayal to move past. He's taking some time to figure things out, but we both know our marriage is over." I reached out, taking her hand in mine. "I'm so sorry, Laura. I never wanted this to happen. I never wanted to hurt anyone." She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "I know, Jake. But what's done is done. We have to find a way to move forward." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of our choices settling over us. Finally, Laura spoke again. "I love you, Jake. I always will, but we need to be realistic about what comes next. Emily and Robert need time to heal, and we can't be a part of their lives while they're doing that." Her words were like a knife to my heart, but I knew she was right. "So what do we do?" I asked, my voice breaking. Laura took a deep breath. "We take a step back. We give them space, and we give ourselves time to figure out who we are and what we want, outside of the chaos we've created." I nodded, knowing that this was the only way forward, even if it felt like tearing myself apart. "Okay," I said, my voice trembling, "but I don't want to lose you, Laura. I can't." She squeezed my hand, her eyes filled with a sad determination. "You won't, Jake. But we need to do this right. For us, for them, for everyone involved." The weeks turned into months, and Laura and I kept our distance. I focused on my work, on rebuilding my life from the ground up. It was a slow, painful process, but with each passing day, I began to find a sense of stability, a way to move forward. I continued to reach out to Emily, not with the hope of reconciliation, but with the desire to make amends. Eventually, she agreed to meet with me. We sat in a small cafe, the atmosphere tense but civil. "Jake," she said, her voice calm but guarded, "I've been thinking a lot about what happened, and I've decided to move on with my life. Lily and I are going to be okay, but we need to do it without you." Her words, though painful, were delivered with a grace and strength that left me in awe. "I understand, Emily. I'm so sorry for everything. I wish you both nothing but the best." As we parted ways, I felt a sense of closure. Emily and Lily would be okay, and that knowledge gave me a small measure.